Here we'll discuss populations and samples. In the first question, it says each member of the U.S. House of Representatives is selected and their ages are recorded. We are being asked, are we studying a population or are we studying a sample? The best way to visualize this is first draw a large circle. This large circle symbolizes the population. So the population symbolizes everybody. Now inside of that population, you might have smaller circles, which is only a subset of the population. These smaller circles represent the sample. That's just part of the population. Therefore, in these questions, the critical question is, are we studying everybody that's in a group, or are we only looking at part of the group? This question says each member of the U.S. House of Representatives is selected. So we're looking at each member. That's everybody. Now, if we are looking at everybody, that's going to be the population. The second question asks, at a movie theater, every 7th person who enters is selected. The heights of the selected individuals are recorded. Now in this case, we are not looking at every person who goes into the movie theater. We are only looking at every 7th person. So this isn't everybody in the population, this is only part of the population. Therefore, we say that this is only a sample. The reason why we take samples is because sometimes it's impractical to study an entire population, especially if the population is large. There may be several thousand people moving through a large movie theater every day. Therefore, it makes more sense to only study a sample of that population. Let's also discuss parameters and statistics. If we gather information about a population, the data we gather is called a parameter. However, if we gather information only about a sample, the data we gather is called a statistic. So what we're asking in the bottom two questions is first, is it a population or is it a sample? If it's a population, the information we gather is a parameter. If it's a sample, the information we gather is a statistic. In question 9, it says, in November of 2014, 58% of U.S. senators were Republicans. Now first, are we asking about a population or a sample of the population? All we're given is that we're looking at U.S. senators. Now, in the United States, there are only 100 senators in the entire U.S. Senate. So it would be no big deal to pull data about all 100 of them. It's a fairly small population, and we can look at all 100 of them and say, since we know 58% out of the 100 are Republicans, that is a parameter. Now question 10 asks, the mean number of pages for 20 randomly selected books from an elementary school reading program is 171.25. The key question, once again, is this a population of books or is this a sample of books? Now the question says that this is randomly selected books from an elementary school reading program, and there are 20 of them. Now, we know in an elementary school reading program, there should be a lot more than 20 books in the population. Now because this 20 is not the whole population, but only part of the population, then this 20 is a sample. And because we know that 20 is a sample, the data we gather about that 20 is a statistic. The subject of statistics is centered around selecting a good sample out of the population that can represent the population. We do this because, once again, it's not always practical to gather information about the entire population. For example, the United States has a population of about 300 million people, and it would be impractical to gather information from 300 million people anytime you wanted information about people in the United States. Therefore, instead, we take pieces of that population, we gather information about them to form a statistic rather than directly measuring the parameters. We can draw certain conclusions about the parameters based on the statistics we gather.